That morning, the rain didn't just fall from the sky. It fell on her spirit. The morning rain came down heavy over Lagos, turning the streets into rivers of mud and reflection. The sky hung low, gray and swollen with sorrow. Beneath that weeping sky stood a young woman, barefoot, her clothes soaked and clinging to her thin frame. Her name was Hannah, and in her trembling arms she held her baby, Julia, a few months old, wrapped in a faded piece of cloth that did little to keep her warm. The traffic roared like thunder, impatient horns, the hiss of wet tires, and the voices of vendors calling out their goods. People hurried by, umbrellas above their heads, trying to escape the rain. None of them noticed the woman standing quietly at the roadside. She was like a shadow the world had stopped seeing. Julia whimpered softly, her cry more like a whisper now. Her small lips were pale, her cheeks wet from both rain and tears. Hannah's hands shook as she rocked her child gently, her own body shivering. "Don't cry, my baby," she whispered through chattering teeth. "Mommy's here. We'll find food today." But she had said those same words yesterday, and the day before that. Her stomach twisted painfully, empty since the previous morning. The cold had settled deep in her bones. Her torn slippers barely held together as she shifted her weight from one numb foot to the other. People passed her without looking. Some threw quick, guilty glances before turning away. Others whispered as they walked by. One man said, "Why's she standing there in the rain like that?" His friend laughed. "Ah, my brother, don't mind them. Some of them fake this thing just to get money. Some even rent babies to beg." Their laughter echoed in her ears, louder than the thunder. She heard every word, but she didn't look up. Pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. She kissed Julia's forehead and whispered again, "Don't cry, my angel. God will send help. Just hold on a little longer." Her voice broke. She looked up at the sky, the rain mixing with the tears she refused to let fall. "God," she murmured softly, "don't let my baby die hungry. If you can hear me, please, just help us." The city didn't stop. Cars splashed water on her feet. The smell of roasted corn and fried plantain from nearby stalls filled the air, mocking her empty stomach. Her fingers were so cold she could barely feel them. Still she stayed, because where else could she go? Then, through the blur of rain, something caught her eye. Bright headlights cutting through the downpour. A black SUV was slowing down, gliding gently to the side of the road. She turned away quickly, thinking the driver would honk at her to move. But the car stopped. Completely. For a few seconds, nothing happened. The engine hummed softly, and then the door opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, well-dressed, and clearly didn't belong in a place like this. The rain hit him instantly, darkening his fine suit, but he didn't seem to care. He walked with quiet confidence, his shoes splashing through puddles as he approached her. Hannah froze. Her first instinct was fear. No rich man had ever stopped for her. Not in the rain. Not anywhere. When he got close enough, she saw his face clearly. Strong, calm, and serious. But there was something else in his eyes. Not pity. Not disgust. Something deeper. "Good morning," he said softly. She didn't answer. Her throat felt tight, her voice gone. She only nodded once. He looked down at the baby. "What's her name?" "Julia," she whispered. "Has she eaten?" She shook her head. "Not since yesterday." He hesitated, looking at her soaked wrapper, the trembling hands that held the child. "And you? Have you eaten?" She tried to smile faintly, but it faded before it formed. "No, sir, but it's fine. I just want to feed my baby." He said nothing for a moment. The sound of rain filled the silence between them. Then, with quiet certainty, he said, "Come with me." She blinked. "Sir." He nodded. "Come. Let me help you." Her heart raced. Could she trust him? What if he was one of those men who used women's desperation for their own gain? She had seen too many stories end badly. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw no danger, only sincerity. She looked down at Julia. The baby's breathing was shallow, her hands limp. Hannah's fear turned into a decision. "Okay," she said softly. The man turned and gestured toward his car. The driver rushed to open the back door. Hannah hesitated one last time before stepping forward, her heart pounding. As she entered the warm, leather-scented interior, the air felt heavy with something she couldn't explain. Not fear, not relief, something in between. The door closed. The rain outside softened to a whisper. And for the first time in many days, hope brushed against her heart. Through the blur of rain, she saw a man step out, and she never knew her life had just changed. When he stepped into the rain for me, I thought he'd lost his mind. The rain had not stopped since dawn, and the city of Lagos looked as if it had been washed in sorrow. Inside a black SUV gliding through the wet streets, Dominic Adewale sat silently in the back seat, watching the gray world blur past his window. The soft hum of the engine, the muted rhythm of raindrops, and the scent of fine leather filled the quiet air around him. He should have been thinking about his meeting, the most important one of his year. But his mind was somewhere else. Dominic was one of the wealthiest men in Lagos, a name people spoke with respect and envy. His business empire stretched across cities. He had money, power, and influence. Yet as he sat there, dressed in a perfect suit and polished shoes, he felt a strange hollowness pressing against his chest. He turned his wrist slightly, checking his luxury watch. He was already late. His foreign partners would be waiting, and punctuality was one of his unbreakable habits. But even the weight of that thought couldn't drown the emptiness inside him. He leaned back against the seat and sighed. How is it possible to have everything and still feel like something's missing, he thought. Why can't money silence pain when I see it? Through the tinted glass, he watched the passing faces, street hawkers shouting, children running barefoot through puddles, a mother dragging her son by the hand to avoid the traffic. To him, Lagos was a city of contradictions, beauty and struggle living side by side. As the car slowed near a bend, something caught his attention. A woman standing alone in the rain. She wasn't moving. While others ran for shelter, she just stood there, her arms wrapped around a small baby pressed against her chest. The rain fell heavily on her, but she didn't flinch. Dominic frowned, leaning closer to the glass. Her face was young but tired, her dress soaked and clinging to her thin frame. The baby was crying, weakly, barely audible over the noise of the city. There was no umbrella, no jacket, just a woman standing quietly with nothing but her faith to hold her up. He felt something stir deep inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. Compassion, a sudden ache to do something. He spoke without thinking. "Stop the car." His driver, startled, glanced at him through the mirror. "Sir?" "I said stop," Dominic repeated, his tone calm but firm. The driver hesitated. "Sir, we'll be late for—" "Just stop the car," Dominic said again. The SUV slowed and came to a halt beside the sidewalk. Rain hammered against the roof. Dominic opened the door before the driver could protest. "Sir, please, it's raining." But Dominic was already stepping out. The first drop hit his face, cold and sharp, and within seconds, the fine material of his suit was soaked through. He didn't care. He looked around once more, scanning the crowded sidewalk until his eyes found her. She hadn't noticed him yet. She was busy rocking her baby, whispering something softly. He began to walk toward her. Every step echoed against the wet pavement. The sound of honking cars faded behind him. People turned to stare. A billionaire walking in the rain toward a beggar? It didn't make sense to anyone watching, but to Dominic, it made all the sense in the world. When he finally stood in front of her, he saw everything he needed to see. The exhaustion, the fear, the strength it took just to stand there. He felt his throat tighten. "Good morning," he said, his voice low and steady. The woman lifted her eyes slowly. For a moment their gazes met, and the world around them disappeared. She nodded once. "Good morning, sir." He looked at the baby, whose face was half hidden under the wet wrapper. "What's her name?" "Julia," she replied softly. He stepped closer, his eyes gentle. "Has she eaten?" She shook her head. "Not since yesterday." He frowned slightly. "And you?" She hesitated, then whispered, "No, sir. But I just want food for my baby. That's all I'm asking for." The rain continued to fall, washing the dust off the streets, but her tears blended quietly into it. Dominic said nothing for a long moment. He studied her face, the way her lips trembled, the stubbornness in her eyes, the quiet strength beneath her pain. Then he made his decision. "Come with me," he said. Her body stiffened. "Sir." "Come," he repeated, his voice kind but certain. "Let me help you." She stared at him as if trying to decide whether he was real or just another dream that would vanish. The world had taught her not to trust easily, but there was something in his tone. No pity, no mockery, just calm compassion. She looked down at her baby. The child was quiet now, her little hand limp against Hannah's arm. The sight broke her. She nodded slowly. Dominic stepped back slightly and gestured toward the SUV. The driver, confused but obedient, opened the back door. The woman stepped forward cautiously, her bare feet splashing in puddles. She climbed in, clutching her baby close. The warm air from the car brushed against her wet skin. She sat at the edge of the seat, afraid to lean back, afraid to believe. Dominic followed and closed the door. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The rain drummed on the roof. The driver stared ahead, pretending not to notice. Dominic looked at her one more time, this fragile, quiet woman who had somehow made the entire world stop for him. And for the first time in years, he felt something shift inside his chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the car's heater. He didn't know it yet, but his life had just changed, too. When he said, "Come with me," she didn't know where hope was taking her. "I hadn't eaten in 2 days, but that morning I tasted kindness for the first time." The drive through the rain was silent. Hannah sat on the edge of the seat, her baby pressed tightly against her chest. She didn't dare to lean back. The car's clean leather seats and soft perfume felt like another world she didn't belong to. Her dress clung to her thin body, wet and heavy, and she kept her eyes low, afraid that one wrong move could shatter whatever miracle was happening. Dominic sat beside her, his gaze fixed out the window, lost in thought. He could hear the baby's weak breathing, the sound of her tiny coughs. He was a man used to silence, meetings, money, and endless responsibility. But this silence felt different, heavy. It wasn't emptiness this time. It was awareness. He turned slightly, studying the woman beside him. Her face looked far too young to carry such exhaustion. Yet behind her tired eyes, he saw something that humbled him. Quiet endurance. The driver glanced at Dominic through the mirror. "Sir, should we go to the office?" Dominic shook his head. "No. Find a small restaurant. Somewhere warm." The driver obeyed without question, steering through the flooded streets until they reached a modest roadside restaurant. The smell of food, fried plantain, hot rice, peppered chicken, cut through the damp air. Dominic stepped out first, motioning for Hannah to follow. She hesitated, clutching Julia tighter. "Sir, maybe I can wait in the car," she murmured. He turned to her, his tone gentle but firm. "You've been standing in the rain. Come inside. Please." She swallowed hard and stepped out slowly, keeping her baby covered. Inside, the warmth of the place wrapped around her like a blanket. The tables were simple wooden ones, the air thick with steam and the aroma of fresh stew. For the first time in months, Hannah felt heat touch her skin that wasn't from the sun. Dominic gestured to a chair. "Sit." Hannah hesitated again, her voice trembling. "Sir, are you sure? I don't want to stain anything." He looked at her calmly. You can't stain kindness, Hannah. Sit. She blinked, surprised that he remembered her name. Slowly she sat down, still holding Julia close. Dominic signaled to the waiter. Hot rice, fried plantain, grilled chicken, and warm milk for the baby. The waiter nodded, stealing a curious glance at Hannah before disappearing into the kitchen. Hannah's hands were shaking. She wasn't sure if it was from hunger, fear, or disbelief. When the food arrived, the steam rose in soft clouds, carrying a smell so rich it made her dizzy. The white rice shone against the red stew, the golden slices of plantain glistened with oil, and the roasted chicken gleamed with warmth. Eat, Dominic said quietly. Sir, she whispered, Can I really? He nodded. Yes, you need it. Her eyes filled with tears. Thank you, sir. She didn't start with herself. She first unwrapped the baby gently and tilted the cup of warm milk to Julia's lips. The child drank slowly, her small fingers curling around her mother's wrist. Watching her baby feed made Hannah's eyes well up again. She whispered softly, That's my girl. Only when Julia had finished and was resting quietly in her arms did Hannah pick up the spoon. She took her first bite, slow, hesitant, as though afraid it would be snatched away. The food was hot and rich. It burned her tongue, but she didn't stop. She chewed carefully, the flavor exploding against a mouth that had forgotten what food tasted like. And then the tears came. Not loud, not violent, just quiet streams rolling down her cheeks as she ate. She tried to hide them, but they wouldn't stop. Each bite carried more than food. It carried dignity, hope, and the ache of forgotten comfort. Dominic didn't speak. He just watched. His eyes softened with something he didn't recognize. Empathy. Not the kind born out of guilt, but the kind that saw pain and felt it deeply. For the first time, he didn't see a beggar. He saw a mother, strong, proud, and still standing despite the world's cruelty. When Hannah finally stopped eating, she wiped her face quickly and whispered, Thank you, sir. God bless you. Dominic leaned forward slightly, resting his hands on the table. You don't need to thank me, Hannah. No one should go hungry. She smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. I've begged for days, and people just walked past me. But you stopped. I don't know why, but you did. He paused. Sometimes the things we see are meant to stop us. Maybe this was one of those moments. She looked down, brushing Julia's cheek gently. You don't know what this means to me. My baby. She hasn't smiled in days. Dominic smiled a little. She will. Soon. For a long moment, silence filled the space between them. But it wasn't empty. It was heavy with gratitude, unspoken emotion, and quiet understanding. The waiter came back, cleared the plates, and left without a word. Outside, the rain had slowed, leaving behind puddles that glistened under a pale morning light. Dominic watched as Hannah rocked Julia gently. Where do you live? He asked finally. Her fingers froze. She looked up slowly, her lips parting before any sound came out. We don't really have a place, sir. I sleep anywhere that's dry, under the bridge sometimes, or in the old building near the market. He nodded, his eyes steady. You can't stay there. Sir, I'll take you somewhere safe, he said quietly. Her eyes widened. Sir, you've already done more than enough. He cut her off softly. Let me help you, Hannah. No one should have to live like that. Her heart pounded. She didn't know if this was another test from life or an answered prayer. Dominic looked at her again, his expression kind, but firm. Trust me. For the first time, she did. But when he asked, What happened to you? My heart broke open again. Some stories hurt too much to tell, until someone listens with mercy. For a long while, neither of them spoke. The rain outside had softened to a drizzle, and inside the small restaurant, the world felt still. Hannah sat quietly, holding Julia, her eyes fixed on the table. She had eaten, She was warm, and yet a heaviness clung to her chest. Dominic watched her carefully, sensing that behind her silence was a story she had carried for too long. He leaned forward slightly. "Hannah," he said softly, "what happened to you?" The words landed like stones in her heart. She looked up slowly, her eyes glassy with tears. "Sir, it's a long story," she whispered. "I have time," he said simply. She exhaled deeply, her voice trembling as she began. "I wasn't always like this, sir. I wasn't born on the streets. I grew up in an orphanage in Ibadan. My parents died in a car accident when I was 5. I don't even remember their faces, just their voices." Her gaze dropped to Julia. "I learned early that no one saves you, unless God sends someone." She paused, brushing her fingers across her baby's cheek. "When I turned 18, they told me it was time to leave the orphanage. I had no family, no home, no skill, just faith. So I came to Lagos, hoping to find work." Her voice cracked, but she continued. "I cleaned people's houses. I washed clothes, scrubbed floors, did anything honest. It wasn't easy, but I survived. Then one day I met Jacob." Dominic's expression softened. "Jacob." She nodded. "He was a taxi driver. Kind, funny. The first man who ever made me feel safe. He would bring me food after his shifts. We talked for hours. After a year, he promised to marry me. I believed him." She paused again, her fingers tightening around Julia's blanket. "When I found out I was pregnant, I was scared. But when I told him," he smiled. "He said he'd go to his village to tell his family, that it was their tradition. He said he'd come back in a week." Dominic leaned back slowly, already sensing what was coming. Hannah's eyes filled. "That was the last day I saw him. His number stopped going through. His friends stopped talking to me. I waited for weeks, then months." She bit her lip, fighting back tears. "When my rent finished, the landlady threw me out. I begged for work, but no one wanted to hire a pregnant woman. That's how I ended up on the streets." Her voice broke into a whisper. "The night I gave birth, it was raining, just like today. I was alone under the bridge, crying. But when I heard my baby's cry, I thanked God anyway. Because even in the dark, He gave me something to live for." Dominic didn't interrupt. He just listened, his hands clasped together. The depth of her pain sat heavy in the air. But even in her brokenness, he could hear the faith in her words, a quiet trust that hadn't died, no matter how cruel life had been. When she finally stopped speaking, silence lingered between them. Only the sound of raindrops tapping against the window filled the space. Dominic swallowed hard. "You're stronger than most people I know," he said quietly. "You still believe in hope, even after everything." She looked down, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "Hope is all I have left, sir. If I lose that, I lose everything." Dominic nodded slowly, his eyes soft with admiration. "You won't lose it," he said. "Not while I'm here." She looked up at him, confused. He reached into his pocket, brought out a bundle of money, and placed it gently on the table. "Take this. It'll help for now." Her eyes widened. "Sir, this is too much." He raised a hand to stop her. "It's not too much. You need it." Her hands shook as she picked up the money. "God bless you," she whispered. Dominic reached into his wallet again and handed her a sleek business card. "This has my number," he said. "Call me after 3 hours. I have a meeting now, but when it's done, I'll come to you. I'll make sure you and your baby are safe." She stared at the card as though it was gold. "Thank you, sir," she said softly. Dominic smiled faintly, stood up and buttoned his jacket. 3 hours, he repeated. She nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." As he turned to leave, she looked down at Julia, pressing the card close to her heart. She didn't know that destiny had already written a cruel twist, one that would change everything once more. He said, "Call me in 3 hours." But fate had other plans. Hope slipped from my hands that day. Not as a dream, but as a small piece of paper. When Dominic left the restaurant, Hannah sat there for a long time, staring at the card in her hand. It was small, white, and clean, the kind of thing ordinary people might throw away. But to her, it was the most precious thing she had ever owned. It had his name, his number, and a promise. She ran her fingers over the smooth surface again and again, as if memorizing it. "In 3 hours," she whispered to herself. He said he would come. Julia stirred in her arms, her small face calm after the meal. Hannah smiled softly. For the first time in months, her baby wasn't crying from hunger. That alone felt like a miracle. She needed to keep the card safe. Carefully, she folded it once and tucked it into a tiny pocket sewn inside Julia's little wrapper. A pocket she always used to hide coins people gave her while begging. She patted it gently to make sure it was secure. "It's safe now," she whispered. Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking apart, and sunlight began to creep through, painting the puddles gold. Hannah stepped out of the restaurant, holding her baby close. For the first time, she felt peace. "Maybe this is the beginning of our new life," she said softly, smiling at Julia's sleeping face. She walked back toward the same corner of the street where Dominic had found her earlier that morning. The ground was wet, but the air was fresh, and a few shop owners were sweeping the water from their front steps. One of them looked at her and nodded kindly, a gesture she hadn't seen in a long while. She found the same small wooden bench under the old shop's shade and sat down. "He said he would call after his meeting," she murmured. "I'll wait here. He'll come." Julia slept peacefully on her lap, her tiny chest rising and falling. Hannah hummed softly, her voice blending with the distant hum of traffic. For the first time, she wasn't begging. She was waiting for hope to return. But as she shifted Julia in her arms, the small pocket loosened. The card that carried her lifeline slipped silently from the fabric. It fell onto the wet ground beside the shop, its clean surface now kissed by mud and water. Neither she nor anyone else noticed. Hours passed. The sun rose higher, drying the roads and painting the world in brightness. Hannah looked up at the clock above a nearby stall. It was nearly noon. Her heart fluttered. "He must be finished with his meeting by now," she whispered. "Maybe he's on his way." At that same moment, across town, Dominic was seated in a glass conference room, surrounded by foreign investors. Papers lay neatly across the table. His assistant whispered notes beside him, but his mind wasn't in the room. It was still at that roadside, under the rain, with the woman and her baby. He forced himself to focus, nodding at the right times, saying the right things, but his thoughts kept drifting. Did she find somewhere dry? Did she get home safely? Did she call? The meeting ended with handshakes and polite laughter. As the guests left, Dominic leaned back in his chair, exhaling deeply. Then, instinctively, he reached for his phone. No missed calls. He frowned slightly, checking again. Still nothing. He looked at his watch. Over 5 hours had passed since he'd given her that card. A part of him whispered, "She's not calling. Maybe she never planned to." He shook his head quickly, refusing the thought. No, she wasn't pretending. She was desperate. He could still see the image of her feeding her child before herself, the tears on her face as she whispered, "Thank you." He rubbed his forehead. "Maybe she lost it," he said aloud. "Or maybe she doesn't have a phone." But another voice inside him whispered, "Maybe she fooled you. Maybe you were too kind this time." Dominic stood abruptly. "I'm going out," he told his assistant. "Sir, are you heading to the hotel to meet the guests again?" He shook his head. "No. Somewhere else." Minutes later, his SUV rolled through the city once more, retracing the same streets from that morning. When they reached the restaurant, he stepped out before the driver could even open the door. The air was thick with the smell of fried pepper and rain-soaked dust. He looked around. The same tables, the same wet steps, But Hannah was gone. Something in his chest tightened. He scanned the ground, the street, the nearby corners. Then his eyes caught something near the entrance, a small soggy piece of paper pressed against the wet concrete. He bent down and picked it up. It was his card. The edges were torn, the ink smudged, but his name was still visible. He turned it over slowly, rainwater dripping from its corners. His throat tightened. "Did she throw it away?" he whispered. "Or did it fall?" He stared at the card for a long moment, then closed his hand around it. His jaw clenched. "Driver," he said quietly, "let's go." As the SUV pulled away, he kept the card in his palm, its wet surface sticking to his skin. His mind was full of questions, his heart full of doubt. And miles away, at the edge of the road, Hannah was still waiting. The sun had started to fade, and her baby stirred again. She looked down the street, hope flickering in her tired eyes. "Maybe he got delayed," she whispered. "Maybe he's coming now." But he wasn't, not yet. As he held that soaked card, miles away, I was still waiting. They say waiting builds patience, but that day, it built my heartbreak. The sun had climbed high above Lagos, drying the last of the morning rain. The air smelled of dust and fried food, the kind of afternoon that promised nothing new. Hannah sat under the same wooden shade near the old shop, rocking Julia in her arms. Hours had passed since Dominic had left her with that card and a promise. 3 hours. "I'll come for you." Now it had been 6. She tried to tell herself he was busy. Men like him probably had things she couldn't even imagine. Meetings, calls, people waiting. She looked down at Julia, sleeping peacefully, and smiled weakly. "He'll come, my baby," she whispered. "Maybe he's on his way now." Her hand moved to the small pocket inside Julia's wrapper, where she had hidden the business card. Just to hold it, to remind herself it was real. But when her fingers slipped inside, they touched only cloth. Her heart stopped. She searched again, deeper, faster. Nothing. The pocket was empty. "No," she whispered, her breath catching. She checked her lap, the ground beside her, even the folds of her wrapper. Still nothing. Her body began to tremble. She lifted Julia, checking every corner of the fabric, her voice breaking now. "No, no, no. God, please, not now." Tears blurred her vision. The one thing that tied her to hope, to safety, was gone. A small piece of paper with a name and number. The only way Dominic could find her. Maybe it fell on the bus, she whispered to herself, her words trembling. Or at the restaurant. Her pulse raced. She tied Julia tightly to her back, covered her with a scarf, and began to walk quickly toward the road. The city felt larger, crueler. Every sound, every face, every car looked strange now. She climbed into a yellow bus, her hands shaking as she held onto the metal rail. Her mind was a storm. "Please, God," she prayed under her breath. "Let me find it. Let me find something." The bus moved slowly through traffic. Every minute felt like an hour. Across town, at that very moment, Dominic stepped out of the restaurant with the soaked card still in his hand. His driver held an umbrella over him, but Dominic didn't even notice the rain beginning again. He just stood there for a moment, staring at the wet piece of paper. He felt a pang of disappointment, something deep, unexplainable. "Maybe she never meant to call," he muttered. But another voice inside him whispered, "Or maybe she couldn't." He turned, heading back to the car. "Let's go," he said quietly. As the SUV pulled out of the restaurant driveway, the yellow bus carrying Hannah stopped at the corner. She stepped down, clutching Julia tightly, her eyes scanning the street. Her breath quickened as she saw the familiar building. The same restaurant, the same tables by the window. She hurried toward the door, her slippers slapping against the wet pavement. Just as she reached the front, a black SUV turned the corner and disappeared into traffic. She didn't notice. She ran inside, looking around wildly. "Excuse me," she said to the waitress, her voice shaking. "Did anyone find a small card here? White card. It has a man's name on it." The woman frowned. "No, madam. We cleaned after customers left. Nothing like that." Hannah's chest tightened. Her eyes darted around the room, scanning the floor, the table where she'd sat earlier. It was clean. The tiles gleamed under the dim lights. She bent down, searching under chairs, even checking corners where dirt gathered. Nothing. Finally, her strength gave out. She sat on the nearest chair, holding Julia against her, her tears falling freely now. "God, please," she whispered. "He said he'd help us. Please." But no answer came. The sound of spoons clinking on plates and voices murmuring in the distance filled the silence where hope used to be. She stood again, weak and trembling, and stepped outside. The clouds had thickened once more, and thunder rumbled low in the sky. As she walked away from the restaurant, the first drops began to fall again. The rain returned, gentle at first, then heavier. People rushed for cover, but she didn't. She just kept walking, the child on her back, the tears on her face mixing with the rain. By the time night fell, she had reached the half-finished building she sometimes slept in. The concrete walls were cold, the floor damp. She laid Julia down, gently, on an old cloth, watching her breathe. "I lost it," she whispered. "I lost the only chance we had." The baby stirred, her tiny hand brushing her mother's arm. Hannah smiled faintly through tears. "It's okay, my baby," she said softly. "Mommy will try again." She looked toward the open doorway, where lightning flashed across the night sky. And then she made a promise to herself. Quiet, but fierce. "I'll go back tomorrow," she said. "The same spot, the same place he found us. I'll wait again." Her eyes closed slowly, the sound of rain echoing through the hollow walls. "That night I told myself I'd wait at the same spot again, till hope finds me." While I waited in the sun, joy was cooking in another man's mansion. The morning sun rose bright over Lagos, turning the wet streets into mirrors of gold. Hannah stood once again at the same spot where Dominic had first found her. Her feet were sore, her dress still damp, and her eyes fixed on every passing car. She whispered to Julia, "He will come, my baby. I know he will." But across the city, a different story was unfolding. Dominic's mansion buzzed with music, laughter, and the smell of jollof rice, grilled chicken, and goat meat. His younger brother, Salem, had returned from Atlanta after 17 long years. The compound was alive with joy, friends, family, and celebration. Dominic walked through the house, his heart lighter than it had been in months. Seeing his brother again brought warmth he didn't know he'd missed. Salem was full of jokes, his laughter filling the wide marble hall. Yet as the party continued, Dominic's mind wandered. Somewhere in the noise he saw flashes of rain, of a woman's tired eyes and a child's small trembling hand. Outside the house his driver stood quietly by the car, watching the guests come and go. But his thoughts weren't in the celebration either. He couldn't shake the image of the woman he'd seen earlier that morning, the same one his boss had helped. On his way to the airport to pick up Salem, he had spotted her again, standing in the same place under the rising sun, holding her baby. His chest tightened with worry. She's still there, he thought. Maybe she really did lose the card. He wanted to speak, but how could he interrupt such joy? He waited, restless, until Dominic stepped away from the crowd and headed toward the kitchen to check on the food. That was his chance. "Sir," the driver said in a low voice. Dominic turned, half smiling. "Yes?" "Sir, I saw her again. The woman from yesterday. She was standing at the same spot. The one with the baby." Dominic froze. "You're sure?" "Yes, sir. She looked tired, but she was there." For a long moment, Dominic said nothing. The music from the party drifted faintly through the air. He remembered the rain, her trembling hands, her eyes filled with both fear and faith. Then he looked away, his voice quiet. "Maybe she doesn't want help," he said. "Maybe she threw away the card." The driver shook his head. "No, sir. She didn't look like someone pretending. She looked like a woman waiting." Dominic was silent again, his mind torn between logic and compassion. Then he spoke, firm, but calm. "Go back," he said. "Sir? Go back to that spot. If she's still there, bring her home." The driver nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." As he hurried out, Dominic glanced through the window toward the bright sky above. "If she's still waiting," he murmured, "then maybe this was never an accident. Go back," he told his driver. "And if she still waits, bring her home." When I saw that red SUV stop, my knees almost gave way. The sun had climbed high, and the heat pressed against Hannah's skin like fire. Her baby, Julia, whimpered softly on her back. Hours had passed since morning, yet she refused to leave that spot. Her eyes followed every car that passed, her heart lifting for a moment, then breaking again each time it wasn't him. She was about to give up when she heard the sound of an engine slowing down. A red SUV pulled over beside her. For a second, she froze. Her breath caught in her chest. Then she saw him, Dominic's driver, stepping out of the car. Her hands flew to her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. Tears sprang to her eyes before she could stop them. The driver walked toward her, his expression calm but kind. "Madam," he said softly, "you are the woman my boss helped yesterday, right?" Hannah nodded quickly, her voice trembling. Yes, please tell him I didn't throw it away. I lost the card. I searched everywhere. I went back to the restaurant. I looked on the road. I didn't mean to lose it." The driver studied her face, the dark circles under her eyes, the cracked lips, the sincerity in her voice. There was no lie there, only exhaustion, fear, and truth. "It's all right," he said gently. "My boss sent me back for you. Come with me." Her knees almost gave out. He sent you?" "Yes, madam. He said if you're still waiting, I should bring you home." Hannah covered her face and began to sob quietly, her shoulders shaking. "Thank you, God," she whispered through the tears. "You didn't forget me." The driver helped her open the back door, and she stepped in carefully, clutching Julia close. As the SUV began to move, Hannah looked out the window, watching the city rush past. The tall buildings, the bright shops, the people. Everything felt unreal. When the car finally stopped, her heart began to race. The gates before her were tall and gleaming, opening slowly to reveal a vast mansion surrounded by flowers and shining windows. She stared in disbelief. "This is his house?" she asked softly. The driver smiled. "Yes. You're safe now." He led her through the front door. Inside, the air smelled of perfume and grilled food. Laughter echoed from the sitting room, where Dominic and his brother Salim were entertaining guests. The moment Dominic looked up and saw Hannah standing there, holding her baby, the room fell silent. He stood up slowly, shock washing over his face. She knelt instantly, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Sir, please, I didn't mean to lose it. I went back, I searched." Dominic crossed the room and took her by the hands before she could finish. "No," he said softly, lifting her up. "Don't kneel. You've done nothing wrong." Every guest in the room watched quietly. No one understood who she was, but they could feel something sacred in that silence. The meeting of two hearts, connected by fate. Dominic looked at her baby, then back at her. His voice was low, but warm. "Come with me," he said. And in that moment, Hannah realized something she had never known before. Real kindness doesn't humiliate. It restores. When he said, "Come with me," I realized kindness doesn't humiliate. It restores. That night I slept under a roof, not of brick, but of mercy. The maid led Hannah down a quiet hallway, her bare feet brushing against the soft carpet. She had never walked through a place so clean, so bright. The air smelled of soap and flowers. The walls gleamed, and every step echoed softly. When the maid opened the door, Hannah froze. The room was beautiful. White curtains swayed gently beside a large bed, the sheets spotless, a soft light glowing from the corner. "This will be your room," the maid said kindly. "You can bathe here. Food will be brought soon." Hannah's voice trembled. "Thank you. Thank you so much." She laid Julia gently on the bed. The baby turned once, then sighed, already sinking into a deep, peaceful sleep. Hannah watched her daughter's tiny chest rise and fall, tears filling her eyes. For months, Julia had slept on cold floors, under bridges, on dusty cardboard. But tonight, she was wrapped in warmth. In the kitchen, Dominic stood with his brother, Salim. The house was quiet now. The guests had left, and the celebration had faded into stillness. Salim leaned against the counter, his eyes thoughtful. "That woman," he said slowly. "The one you brought in. Who is she?" Dominic told him everything. The rain, the hunger, the lost card, the waiting. As he spoke, Salim's eyes softened. "You did the right thing," he said. "Our mother would have done the same." At the mention of their late mother, Dominic fell silent. He could still remember her hands, rough but gentle, the way she worked herself sick just to keep them fed. "She used to tell me," Dominic murmured, "never ignore pain when you can ease it." Salim nodded quietly. "She'd be proud of you." When Dominic looked toward the hallway where Hannah's room was, something stirred in him. Not pity, but respect. The woman had survived storms that would have broken most. "Tomorrow," he said firmly, "I'll find a way to help her stand again. She won't go back to the streets." Salim smiled. "And I'll help you." Later that night, Dominic knocked gently on Hannah's door. She stood near the window, wearing one of the clean dresses the maid had given her. Julia was fast asleep in the crib beside her. "Sir," she whispered, startled. He shook his head. "You don't need to call me sir. Just rest tonight. You and your daughter are safe here." Her lips trembled as she whispered, "God bless you." Dominic smiled faintly. "Tomorrow I'll take you somewhere new," he said. "You and your daughter deserve more." Hannah's heart swelled with gratitude. For the first time in a long while, she believed him. "Tomorrow I'll take you somewhere new. You and your daughter deserve more." He gave without asking, and for the first time, I felt seen. The next morning, sunlight filtered softly through the curtains, wrapping the room in gold. Hannah woke to the smell of food, warm bread, tea, and eggs neatly placed on a tray. Julia was already awake, smiling for the first time in days. Hannah fed her gently, whispering prayers of gratitude between each bite. When she stepped out of the room, Dominic was waiting in the hallway, dressed neatly in a gray suit. "Good morning," he said with a small smile. "Come, we're going somewhere." "Sir?" she asked, confused. "You and Julia need a few things," he replied. "You can't live on memories of pain anymore." Minutes later, they were seated in his car, driving through the city. The world outside looked different now, brighter, alive. For the first time, Hannah wasn't walking with dust on her feet. She was looking out of a window, watching possibilities flash by. Their first stop was a clothing store. The moment Hannah stepped inside, she froze. The lights, the mirrors, the rows of colorful dresses. Everything sparkled like a dream. "Pick what you like," Dominic said simply. Her eyes widened. "Sir, I can't." "You can," he said firmly. "You deserve it." At first, she touched the dresses without taking any, afraid they might cost more than her life had ever been worth. But when she looked at Julia in her arms, wearing the same thin wrapper she'd slept in for weeks, something inside her shifted. She began to choose. A soft pink dress for Julia, a blue wrapper for herself, then another, a little brighter. The cashier packed the clothes in neat paper bags while Hannah stood by, still half in disbelief. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know how to thank you." Dominic only smiled. Just promise you'll never stop believing you're worth it." Their next stop was a baby shop. Shelves filled with bottles, diapers, blankets, and toys surrounded them. Hannah's hands trembled as she touched a small yellow rattle. "Julia's never had anything like this," she said softly. "Then she will now," Dominic replied, adding it to the counter. Finally, they stopped at a phone store. The bright lights reflected on the glass counters as Dominic spoke to the attendant. "Something simple but strong," he said. Within minutes, the man handed Hannah a brand new phone. Her reflection glowed faintly on the screen. Dominic guided her to the telecom office nearby, where they restored her old number. When the SIM finally activated, she held the phone like treasure, her fingers trembling. "I've not had one since before I gave birth," she whispered. Dominic nodded. "Now, if anything happens, you can call me. You're not alone anymore." Hannah looked at him, her eyes glistening. "You've done more than I ever imagined anyone could." He smiled faintly. "Sometimes, we meet people not to change their lives, but so they can change ours." As they drove back, the air between them was quiet, peaceful. Hannah held Julia close, her heart full of awe. She'd come from begging in the rain to sitting in a car filled with gifts she'd never dreamed of. But deep down, she could feel something else. A strange stirring in the air, like fate wasn't finished. Yet. But fate wasn't done surprising me. Not yet. Some doors open not with keys, but with kindness. The afternoon sun hung soft and golden as the black SUV rolled quietly through the streets of Lagos. Hannah sat in the back seat, Julia sleeping peacefully against her shoulder. The car hummed with silence. Not of fear this time, but disbelief. Every passing moment felt like something out of a dream she was too afraid to wake up from. Dominic sat beside her, calm and thoughtful. His brother Salem was in the front passenger seat, scrolling through his phone. Every now and then, he turned to glance at Hannah in the rearview mirror, studying her with quiet compassion. After a few minutes, Salem looked back and said, "Hannah, I want you to come somewhere with us. There's something I want to show you." Hannah blinked, confused. "Show me, sir." Salem smiled faintly. "You'll see soon." The car turned off the main road and into a quiet residential area lined with palm trees. Ahead stood a tall apartment complex, newly painted, modern, its walls gleaming like they'd just caught the sun. The car stopped at the gate, and Salem gestured for her to follow. "Come," he said gently. Hannah stepped out slowly, holding Julia close. The compound smelled of fresh paint and earth after rain. Children played in the distance, their laughter echoing. She felt small in the middle of it all, unsure what to say, or why she was even there. They walked up a short staircase and stopped before a brown wooden door. Salem turned to her and said softly, "You remind me of someone." "Someone?" she asked quietly. He nodded. "Our mother." Her breath caught. "She was a single mother," Salem continued, his voice lowering. "She raised me and Dominic alone. She worked from sunrise to sunset. There were nights she went hungry just so we could eat. She was strong, proud, and kind, just like you." Dominic looked down, his face shadowed with memory. Salem went on. "She used to say, 'If God blesses you, be someone else's answered prayer.'" He smiled a little, his eyes warm. "And now I finally understand what she meant." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver key. "This apartment," he said slowly, "is yours." Hannah froze. "Mine," she whispered, unable to believe it. "Yes," Salem said. "From today, this is your home. You'll never sleep on the street again." Her legs gave out before she could stop them. She fell to her knees, clutching Julia to her chest, her tears spilling freely. "Oh God," she sobbed. "What did I do to deserve this?" Dominic knelt beside her immediately, helping her up. "You didn't have to do anything," he said softly. "You just survived. And that's enough." Salem handed her the key, placing it carefully in her trembling hands. "Go ahead," he said gently. Open it. Hannah turned the key slowly. The door clicked open, revealing a bright, cozy apartment. Freshly painted walls, a small living room with a soft couch, and a window that opened to the city skyline. Sunlight spilled across the floor, like a blessing. She stepped inside, her bare feet sinking into the clean tiles. The air smelled new, like beginnings. She walked through each room slowly. A small kitchen with shiny cabinets, a neat bedroom with curtains fluttering in the breeze, and a crib already waiting by the wall. Her tears wouldn't stop. She turned around, holding Julia tight. "I've prayed for years, just for one safe night," she whispered. "And now I have a home." Salem smiled gently. "You don't owe us anything, Hannah. You've reminded us of what truly matters." Dominic nodded, his eyes soft. "This is only the beginning. I promised you a new life, remember?" Hannah covered her face, crying harder. "You've given me more than life, sir. You've given me dignity." Salem took a step closer, his tone calm but filled with meaning. "Then it's time for your next step." She looked up, confused. "Next step?" He exchanged a knowing glance with Dominic. Then he said, "We're also opening a supermarket." "In your name." Hannah gasped, the words hitting her like a wave. Her eyes widened, and for a moment she couldn't breathe. "Me," she whispered. "A supermarket. In my name?" Salem nodded. "You'll be in charge. We'll help you learn. You deserve not just a home, but a future." Hannah clutched Julia tightly, her voice breaking. "I can't believe this. You've changed my life." Dominic smiled softly. "No, Hannah. You changed it yourself, by never giving up." But his next words changed everything. "We're also opening a supermarket in your name. Sometimes peace calls from the past you thought had forgotten you." The morning breeze swept gently through Hannah's new apartment. The sound of the city hummed softly beyond the window, car horns, children laughing, voices of life returning. On the small table near the couch sat a brand-new phone, the same one Dominic had given her days before. It vibrated suddenly. Hannah blinked. She wasn't expecting a call. The screen showed an unfamiliar number. For a moment she hesitated, her fingers trembling. Then slowly, she answered. "Hello?" There was a pause, followed by a woman's soft voice. "Hello? Is this Hannah?" "Yes, this is she." The voice on the other end grew quiet for a moment. "My name is Evelyn. I'm Jacob's cousin." Hannah froze. Her heart skipped a beat. That name, Jacob. The name she hadn't spoken in months. The name tied to her pain, her loss, and the unanswered questions that haunted her every night. I'm sorry," she whispered. "Did you say Jacob?" "Yes," the woman said gently. "I've been trying this number for over a year, but it was always off. Today, by God's grace, it went through." Hannah gripped the phone tighter, her breathing shallow. "Where is he?" she asked. "Please tell me. I waited so long for him to come back." The woman's voice broke softly. "Hannah, Jacob never made it home." The world went still. Evelyn continued, her tone tender but heavy. "He had a terrible accident the same day he left Lagos. He was in a coma for 4 months. He passed away quietly. We didn't know how to reach you. He had written your name in a small notebook, but there was no address." Hannah's legs gave way. She sank slowly into the couch, her heart pounding, tears streaming down her face. "He didn't abandon me," she whispered. "No," Evelyn said, her own voice breaking. "He loved you. I read his messages. He wanted to marry you. He was proud you were carrying his child. Before he died, he whispered your name." Hannah pressed the phone to her chest, crying quietly. Julia, who had been playing nearby, crawled to her mother and touched her hand, her tiny face filled with innocent curiosity. Hannah picked her up and held her tightly. "Thank you," she whispered into the phone. "Thank you for telling me. You've given me peace." Evelyn sighed gently. "Jacob's mother is still alive. She's very old now. She believes her son left this world without a child. She cries every day. But now, maybe she can find comfort in knowing she has a granddaughter. Hannah nodded, wiping her tears. Tell her I'll bring Julia to her. She deserves to know her blood lives on. After the call ended, Hannah sat in silence for a long time, letting the tears dry slowly on her cheeks. They were not tears of sorrow anymore. They were tears of release. After years of wondering, she finally knew the truth. Jacob hadn't betrayed her. He had simply never made it back. That afternoon, Dominic and Salem came by to visit. Hannah had asked them to meet her at her supermarket, the one Salem had opened in her name. When they arrived, they found her behind the counter, her eyes glowing with quiet strength. Shelves lined with goods surrounded her: rice, oil, soap, baby food. Customers moved in and out, smiling as they paid. Dominic stood near the entrance, watching her with pride. "You've done well," he said softly. Hannah smiled. "I've had the best teachers." Salem chuckled. "You did all the hard work. We just gave you a chance." Julia, now a little stronger, ran toward Dominic, her tiny hands reaching out. He lifted her into his arms, laughing. "You've grown," he said, his heart full. Hannah looked at them, two men who had walked into her life when everything was broken. And somehow, through their kindness, she had found not only safety, but family. She turned to them and said quietly, "I got a call today." Dominic frowned slightly. "A call?" "From Jacob's cousin," she said. "He's gone, Dominic. He died long ago. But he didn't abandon me. He never meant to leave." Dominic's expression softened. "I'm sorry," he said gently. She shook her head, smiling through tears. "Don't be. I'm at peace now. For the first time, I can breathe without pain." Salem placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then let that peace guide you forward. You've survived your storms, Hannah. Now it's time to live." As evening came, the three of them stood outside the store. The sun sank low over the city, bathing everything in gold. The streets buzzed with laughter and life. Dominic looked at the shop's sign above the door, Julia's Corner Supermarket. He smiled. "It suits you," he said. "A place built from grace." Hannah looked at him, her eyes glistening. "Everything good that's happened to me started the day you stopped your car in the rain." He smiled softly. "And everything good that's happened to me started the day you made me remember what humanity means." For a long moment, they stood in silence, the golden light wrapping around them like a promise. Real wealth isn't measured in money, but in mercy. We rise by lifting others, because sometimes the greatest miracles are not in what we receive, but in what we give. If this story touched your heart, don't just scroll away. Let me know what moment moved you the most in the comments. Remember, your one like or share can carry this message of kindness to someone who needs it tonight. And if you believe mercy still exists in this world, subscribe now. More true, soul-stirring stories are coming your way. Stay with us, because every week, a new story reminds us that even pain can lead to purpose.